Hello, Internet. I'm Evan Dashevsky, Features Editor with PCMag.com. Welcome to the Convo. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about art. Okay, art helps us relate to the world around us through the mediums in our environment. Now, they didn't make much video art in the 1800s because they didn't have video, and conversely, people don't generally make cave paintings today because we don't live in caves. So we live in an era where technology constantly creates new platforms and new mediums. So how does that affect art? Well, my guest today is attempting to find out. She is a transdisciplinary artist who works at the intersection of art and science. She is currently a research associate at the MIT Media Lab, where she creates research-based art that explores the intersections between science, culture, and emerging technologies. Her work has been presented at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the Asian Art Museum, the Wisner Gallery, and Harvard University, just to name a few. And her work has been featured in Vice and Wired. Very cool. LIU.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to the Convo. Okay, now for those of you at home, the show is called The Convo, not The Dialogue. So if you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and Social Pete will read them off throughout the show. Now, if you're watching this after the fact and are listening to the podcast and you have questions for Ani about the art or about the future or about technology, as always, sucks to be you. Okay, now let's just break it down and go to the fundamentals. Now, an art teacher in high school once told me something that always stuck with me. She defined art as a series of decisions that leads to a final product. And I thought, well, that's interesting. It's just, this is, I'm not a young man, so it always kind of like stuck with me all these years.
Yeah.
I don't know, do you have a working definition of what art is?
Oh, that's so interesting. And I really love that you shared that with me. So I'm in a group called Design Fiction at the Media Lab, and I often get asked, what is design fiction, which is kind of similar. So for us, the practice of art that we do is the use of design to ask questions, and especially being at MIT and all is often to ask questions like, what are the social and ethical and political implications of emerging technologies? So in a lot of ways, the art we make, or at least in my own practice, it's almost like a framing of questions. I feel like, in a way, it's a lot like my science colleagues, where they set up a hypothesis, right? And then they test it to try to find out something new about the world. And my questions are slightly more strange, perhaps, but that's how I often go about it, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go into some of the cool, strange projects that you've worked on, but also let's just talk about the Media Lab for a minute.
Sure.
We recently had Kate Darling. She actually was the one who recommended you.
I adore her.
Yeah, she's great. So we had her on talking about robots. She's a robot ethicist. Now, you're an artist. So what is the Media Lab? What are they doing over there that they bring all these people together?
Well, let's see. Joey always likes to call it a disobedient group of multidisciplinary people who are all brilliant, who couldn't fit anywhere else.
Okay.
So the Media Lab is, I feel so lucky to be there. It's like this incredible laboratory where a lot of people are doing just really different, I don't want to say the word fringe, but like really between disciplines. So for instance, design fiction, right? Somewhere between art and technology. You have groups like Fluid Interfaces that explore really different ways that humans can relate to computers, or redefining that human-computer interface. You have groups like Mediated Matter that literally kind of reprogram matter as a medium for design. So it's really strange, I know. Feel free to ask more about it. It's just got these weird lab titles, We have tangible media, or like...
So it's like answering questions that not a lot of people have asked yet.
That's a really great way to put it.
No, they do a lot of. Whenever you hear of like a cool new project, often the MIT Media Lab is somehow involved. So a lot of great stuff has come out of there throughout the years. Okay, but let's talk about some of your stuff. Okay, so what do we have here before us? These are non-working prototypes. What is this project?
So this was actually one of the earliest works of kind of multimedia electronic art that I ever made. I made this in architecture school, and so it's like a helmet.
What was that little school you went to?
I went to Harvard Architecture School. So these are two helmets that we would wear, and it would allow us to swap vision with each other. And I made it my last year at the GSD, where I was reading a lot of Marshall McLuhan and media studies, and I was reading about how with each technology, basically, humans themselves kind of change how we perceive the world. And so I was reading a lot about cybernetics and the noosphere and the hive mind and how we're all connected to each other through social media and things like that. And so I was like, what is it like then to actually swap a sense with someone? What if we were actually tethered through our bodies? And what if we were part of the same feedback loop? So I created this set of helmets that let us swap vision. And it's super interesting because I wore this with a lot of different people for up to an hour at a time. And in the beginning, you're basically, in a way, weirdly disabled because you know, you could like walk into a trash can and you can't see it. But slowly we do become in this loop where you walk into a trash can and I hear the crash and I whip my head over to you and you see yourself walk into a trash can. So then we develop this kind of sixth sense to like feedback with each other. It was part of a project where I was trying to, it was like kind of, it was before Black Mirror, but I think I was like attempting a kind of Black Mirror art. It was right when Google Glass came out and Harvard acquired all these Google Glasses and I wore them around New York and like people took pictures of me and I was like, this is so weirdly dystopian and what is it that we're trying to do with these devices? Is it to enhance our connection to each other? So what happens when kind of like that phrase, you know, to see through someone else's eyes or to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. So like tried to make this piece of work that kind of explored that.
Well, where did it leave you? Do you feel optimistic about where technology is doing to we as a species, or are you pessimistic? Or a mixed
I think
bag?
I'm more like curious.
Curious? Okay.
It's so interesting, right? Like, I think often people say things like technology will ruin humanity or it will save humanity, but I think that it's more like a co-evolution. So I think that it's more like observing this crazy roller coaster ride and trying to guide it slightly. Yeah.
Well, but let's go back to more like of the art project. Was there's one that made a lot of news recently. Was on a lot of different websites. This was okay. So you used a EEG machine, which is basically it measures brain activity, and people have done a lot of cool projects with these throughout the years, where they like make music or kind of like hook it up to different machines and stuff. What did you do with your EEG machine?
So recently, my latest project is this kind of feminist piece where I use an EEG machine to control the movement of sperm with my mind.
Sure. We do have a clip of this where we'll share real quickly, and then you can jump into what it means. Whoa, right? Okay, so where the audience just watching there?
So, so I set up this performance where a woman wears an EEG machine which measures the electrical activity on your scalp, which roughly translates to some amount of brain activity. And this was programmed to then control a little circuit under a microscope. So this is like always such an interesting thing for me to talk about. I can talk about sperm for days now. So sperm exhibit this really interesting phenomenon called galvanotaxis, in which all the sperm will swim towards the positive electrode in an electric field. So the EEG signals are translated onto this little circuit that makes a little electric field and causes all the sperm to swim in a direction, and then it'll switch and swim to the next direction. So the woman can control the movement of that sperm along an XY axis. Like,
all right, before we get to the political meaning of that, it's just I'm curious. I never heard that sperm are magnetically inclined. Is that like
Isn't that interesting?
Do eggs give off a magnet?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure. So usually an egg gives off a chemical signature, and then sperm will swim towards it. They're also will swim towards specific temperatures. Galvanotaxis is a phenomenon that lots of other single-celled organisms exhibit, like paramecia. And from what I understand, it also is a mechanism by which cells will gather on your body on wounds to heal you. So it is something that happens to a lot of things around us. And I was taking this class called How to Grow Almost Anything. And I was learning about galvanotaxis, and I was like, wow, I wonder if this works with sperm, and what are the implications of a woman controlling sperm in such a way?
Well, there was a political meaning behind it. It was because This was at the time that Trump's famous tape came out. You know the one. He grabbed things, or talked about grabbing things. So then you wanted to say, like, what it was like if a woman controlled something that was uniquely male, and that was how this art project came together.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many things that were so infuriating about this election.
I can't imagine that. Yeah.
And a lot of the policies that specifically related to health and women's health. And there's a long history of basically policies that control what a woman can or cannot do with her body, especially as it pertains to birth control. And rarely do you see policy, you know, there's this image of Donald Trump in a cabinet of basically men signing this document, and it's almost like it was very memeable. They almost look like villains. And there's this political activist group in France who redid the same photograph with like basically famous female politicians, and you never see this, like a room full of women signing an edict. I think in theirs, the group is called 52, and they had this one that was like, it is forbidden for men to ejaculate for recreational purposes or something like that. And then I think it just revealed how absurd some of these policies are. Yeah. So given this long history of kind of like female body domination, it was a piece that spoke to that and what would it be like for a woman to feel this. And so I hooked this EEG up to some of my friends, and they got to try it, and they were like, wow, this is like strangely empowering. And I must admit, I talked to men about it, and they find it incredibly uncomfortable.
A little bit. Facebook, you have a question.
Okay. How do you capture scent for your human perfume project?
Yeah. We work a lot with smells.
Yes.
Okay.
So to kind of give a background on the project before I answer it, so that project came about when I was learning a lot of synthetic biology. When I first arrived to lab, the Media Lab is famous for its basically human-computer interaction, and Nicholas Negroponte recently famously said, digital is dead, bio is the new digital. So, you know, I got there and I just finished making all these gadgets, and I was like, okay, I have to learn synthetic biology. And as I looked around, I was like, wow, a lot of this super personal research is done for very commercial gain, you know, like agriculture being made for plants having longer shelf life versus nutrition and things like that. So it's like, what would emotionally driven science look like? And so I started this project where I wanted to grow a plant that smelled like my grandmother who had passed away, and then to plant it at her grave and to create this sensorial memory of her, basically biotechnology for like deep emotion. So I started on this journey of trying to cultivate a flower that smelled like a person.
I think we should have some photos of it. If Cambot, if you want to follow us over here.
Sure. These are, so
that's in this one?
They're actually, it's spread in a few places, but this is part of that research where I was starting to create all of these plants. So in the beginning, I started to cultivate all these carnivorous plants because it emits kind of like a flake odor to attract prey. And lo and behold, of course, being so naive, I was like, maybe we'll just make this one gene edit with CRISPR. And then I talked to some scientists, and they're like, wow, that is like totally impossible. So to kind of answer that question, it was really complicated in some ways. So we started by collecting lots of samples of human smells, like with dirty T-shirt and things like that. And then we would send it through a mass spec to try to figure out what are the molecular compositions of these smells. And then I was working with a chemist named Noam Priores. And even though we got the kind of chemical makeup of it, every time we made it, it would just kind of smell wrong. So in the end, we made these human perfumes. We tried a lot of different ways, but the most successful way is a really ancient technique, where, like, basically through distillation. So the same way that people make essential oils with roses or flowers. So I would take my husband's dirty T-shirt, for instance, and then I would boil it in a vat of fat. And then I would capture the fumes that came from there, and then it would run through a coil that would cool down, and then you would basically have the essence of his T-shirt. Another way would be to take the dirty T-shirt and to soak it in a solvent, like chloroform or alcohol, and then to have that solvent capture all the volatile molecules that create that smell, and then again to distill it in a rotovap. So I created something like 13 different perfumes, and I became really interested. You know, there's all this kind of research that shows and not shows that we can signal to each other subconsciously through our smells, like whether you can smell fear or whether...
Can you smell fear?
Yeah, can you smell fear?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, how much of our mate selection is due to these like smell cues. So I tried to collect the smells of my husband in different times of the day when he was in different moods. I would like let other people smell them and see what their reaction was, or to see if they could.
So you have your husband in
predict.
perfume form somewhere.
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay.
I have vials and vials of it. He finds it a little bit. It's funny. He thinks it smells like his brother's, and his brothers think that it smells repulsive.
Okay.
So
Now that's a new medium. I don't know, is there a name for that? Sort of. Is it art? I guess so.
So it's really interesting, right? Like, that's the whole kind of transdisciplinary and anti-disciplinary.
Anti-disciplinary.
Because
I like that.
I have to say, I have to say, like, when I go to art galleries, sometimes they're like, "What kind of artist are you? Are you a sculptor? Are you a painter?" And then a lot of times in lab, they're like, "Well, what kind of scientist are you? Like, what were you trained in?" So it's kind of this weird hybrid of all the disciplines, which I think make really unique and fertile areas to explore.
Well, that's like to that end. Now, a discussion we have here a lot, and perhaps people out in the audience are getting sick of me asking it, is that, like, you know, we talk about STEM. We're totally pro STEM here and encouraging amongst the young. I'm worried that we are encouraging STEM at the victimhood, or at the I'm not sure what the word I'm looking here is, while bringing down the humanities and the arts. So I think they we can do both. I think and I think look, we probably at this point in history, if not at all points in history, probably need more scientists and engineers than we do of fine artists. That's probably true, but I think to make a better scientist is someone who has like a minor in the arts, or is like an art in their hobbies, or an enthusiast. Like as when it comes to education and like bring up the youths.
Totally.
What do you think is the proper mixture of arts, of STEM and the arts?
I like the word STEAM, actually. It's
too.
like
Yes.
science, technology, engineering.
The other guy, Tyson, did not. He was in
Oh,
here.
really?
Yes, he was angry at me about that, bringing that up.
What? Oh, I'll have to take it on with him. I mean, for sure, I do think that we should train more science and technology literate students, but I really do think that we need more engineers, more thoughtful engineers, right? Like, I think in history we kind of see what happens when we try to hyper-optimize the human race, or when we become too logical in a way. So it's my dream that, you know, every science student takes a mandatory philosophy class or a media arts class, or even just reads a lot more science fiction, because I feel like science fiction or really good science fiction is very philosophical in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And predictive uncannily of the things to come. But I really do think that, certainly for me, arts and designs make difficult topics easier to learn, or it kind of gives you the drive to like sit for hours debugging your code, you know?
Facebook, you have a question.
Have any books influenced your work?
Actually, I was going to ask you about we'll talk some science fiction. Like what has been influencing you recently?
The last book I read was Ted Chiang. Story. Is it called? I think it's called Stories of Your Life. He's the man who wrote the story for Arrival.
Okay.
It's such a good. So it kind of blows my mind. After I saw Arrival, I loved it, and then I read his whole book of short stories. And he's a self-taught writer. I guess he's an engineer who writes on the side for fun.
Perfect.
It's like amazing.
You can relate to that.
And there's the story that I really love. So, you know, I went to Harvard and I'm at MIT. And basically, I have a tiger mom. And he has this one story about what happens to you if you become too intelligent. And it's just like this hypothetical story where the military has developed a drug that exponentially increases your IQ every day. And it just follows through this person's inner monologue as the days go by.
Interesting.
And I thought it was a really interesting, because I think that we really fanboy intelligence right now, right? Other books. Well, I have some really like academic books. The Question Concerning Technology by Heidegger was very influential for me in the beginning. Marshall McLuhan, and the way he talks about media, because basically So Marshall McLuhan talks about media and how each thing, like the television, totally like frames the way we see reality. And I think more and more, as our technologies become more like sublimated onto our body and become invisible, we're totally influenced by them in ways that are not obvious at all. And I think it is a time to take a lot of attention and care.
Well, let's also talk about, so you just graduated from MIT.
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, so what do you do with all this knowledge of making stinky plants and, and weird gadgets and stuff? Like, well, like what's next?
So the very next thing I'm doing is I'm giving a talk in Brazil on Friday.
Very cool.
And then I'm going to Shenzhen for a month. MIT has access to a factory in August, and I'm hoping to make some work about manufacturing and labor.
Okay.
Which is both kind of terrifying and really exciting to me.
Yeah.
And then really for me it's just spending my lifelong pursuit making art and asking these kinds of questions about humanity and technology and what it means to be a human where technology advances so quickly.
Now your website is anti-disciplinary. Yeah. So you can check out, and I'm sure Pete will leave it in the comments there. Okay, so we always ask the same 10 questions to every guest who comes in.
Okay.
Okay. Now these are mostly short answers, but if you want to say more, the floor is yours. Windows or Mac?
Oh, that's so political.
It is a little bit. Yeah.
I'm a Mac user.
Okay. Android or iOS?
iOS.
Okay. Have you recently come across a piece of technology that made you think, "Wow, I'm really living in the future"?
This is not super new anymore, but definitely CRISPR made me think twice about gene editing and also gene drives.
Right. What are gene drives?
So gene drives allow the kind of gene edits to proliferate through a population throughout generations. So Kevin Esvelt at the Media Lab in Sculpting Evolution does work in this way.
Okay.
And I just don't want to say too much because I don't know what is under strict IP and what isn't.
Okay. So something crazy is going to come out of MIT Media Lab in the near future. When you're waiting at line in the store, what's the first app you open on your phone to pass the time?
Ooh, I read a lot of news, just the New York Times.
Ed Snowden, traitor or hero?
Oh, I'd like to say hero.
Okay. Will the singularity occur in 2054?
That's a little too soon, I think.
Too soon? Okay. Is there intelligent life out there?
I think so.
Okay. Is Bigfoot out there?
That is more unknown.
Okay. What is your go-to drink at the bar?
Wow.
Yep.
A Negroni.
Okay. And finally, we're in the golden age of television. What you watching these days?
You know, I'm not watching anything these days.
Okay.
Mostly.
Everything's on demand. You can fit it around your schedule. That's
It's
what's
so
amazing
funny.
about it.
In so many ways, I feel like I'm really low-tech and old-fashioned. I like to read paper books.
Okay. Paper books actually are making a comeback. It's weird. Books survived. Hi. Books survived the digital democratization, unlike anything else. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people feel that way. I think even the younger generation kind of I think books are going to make it. It's weird.
Totally. I heard Amazon is opening up a paper bookstore.
Open now in Midtown, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just moved back to New York.
Okay,
No, totally. I think that there's a deep desire for the nostalgia of older things. Like you see wood making a comeback in a lot of tech things and ceramics and stone. So I wonder, I think that it always goes back and forth a bit. A lot of my friends like refurbish cathode ray like televisions and things like that.
No, they're cool.
Yeah,
There's a lot of upcycled like sort of materials, which are really cool.
Completely.
I think that's all we have for now. For anybody at home who's watching this for the first time, give us a like, give us a share. We appreciate those. Check out some of our past interviews. We've done a lot of these. The Convo is also now an audio podcast. It's on iTunes and Stitcher and all the places. And also, if you like it, give us a like, give us a review there, because that really seems to help. Thanks to Annie for coming.
Thank you
this
so much for having me.
This is awesome.
So
good luck with all the stuff, and we're looking forward to like watching what you're doing.
Thank you.
And as for everyone out there who's just part of the Convo, thank you. Thank you to Pete. Thank you to Emmett. Thank you to Jono. And as always, be good to each other. Peace.